Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. It's the off season, so we're talking about off season stuff. Ranking our top 10 head coaches in college football. These are Dill's rankings, so I'm going to tear them apart before we get into it. Just wanted to thank you guys for all the support you guys have shown the channel. Almost up to 950 subscribers. So if you guys like talking college football, you like talking football in general, go subscribe to the channel because we'll be pumping out a lot of good content all summer. Dill, we're going to start with your number 10 guy, Paul Chryst from Wisconsin. Kind of a surprising name that I saw. Why Paul Chryst?
Paul Chryst in Wisconsin's a hard school to win at, I'd say. So that factors into my rankings. Like, you dominate at certain schools, it means less. And Paul Chryst hasn't dominated, but that Wisconsin team is good every year. They've won some really big games. Perennially dominating their side of the division, and
in a horrible.
And I think he's brought back Wisconsin football, where they're generally in the top 20, are cracking the top 10 fairly often, and that's at one of the harder schools to win at, I'd say.
In terms of consistency, I certainly would put Paul Chryst up there. It just what's concerning is he's never really gotten over the hump of winning a Big Ten title and then going on to win, and obviously hasn't made the college football playoffs. But I mean, there's only, 5-6 coaches who have ever cracked the college football playoffs. So that is obviously hard to do.
That's the thing. It's like you want to argue who's really dominating or who's getting there besides the top 5.
Who did you leave off? I feel like Dan Mullen last year was on our list.
Jim Harbaugh I kept off because it's I can't be realistic with him because I'm a Michigan fan. I think and then Jim Harbaugh's had some really down years at Michigan. I think where he's not in Michigan, I think is a more winnable program, and I don't know. It's like we're 500 against.
What about Dave Clawson from the ACC?
Dave Clawson hasn't really come close to going with the top dogs in the ACC, and I don't know. Wisconsin would beat Wake Forest every year by 20, 30 points. So.
Yeah. I can see Paul Chryst. I wouldn't argue too much. What I want to get to now, Ryan Day coming in at 9. You're obviously Michigan guy. Ryan Day coming in lower than most people would have on their power rankings. I kind of agree. The only knock I would have is, yes, he was given the keys to a Ferrari. And he's done well. Like, the Ohio State's been a good team under him. But he's also still building that program up. Like, the recruiting is phenomenal. And
he's made no progress, though. They've gotten 0% better since Urban Meyer. After this year, I think you could arguably say taking a step back. So, they've given up control of the Big Ten, where they just want it easy every year. I don't know. It's like it's hard for me to put him there because it's a very similar argument to Lincoln Riley. Like, it's just he never has gotten the chance to really prove himself, and I don't think he's done anything to make Ohio State better than what they were.
I would say this is his year. Like, we'll come back to this conversation about Ryan Day and his legacy at Ohio State after this year, because this is the year he is poised to really make it happen. I mean, CJ Stroud hadn't thrown a college pass coming into last year. They look good. Obviously, the wide receiver group is phenomenal. Poised to easily win the Big Ten. I think DraftKings has him at -300 to win the Big Ten and make the college football playoffs. So we'll be talking about Ryan Day and kind of evaluating his legacy after this year, because this is certainly setting up to be a year where he's got to make a lot of noise with the tremendous talent that he has. I love this one. Kyle Whittingham coming in at number 8.
And I think him and Dave Aranda are Dave Aranda seems like he's on the rise, but both at schools that are traditionally not powerhouses, hard places to win. And Kyle Whittingham's just been doing it for a long time, where they're consistently really competitive in the Pac-12. This year, they took kind of a step forward, I think, and they might have a shot to win the Pac-12 again. I mean, well, he definitely has. He's got a shot.
He's got a shot. I am not on the Utah train this year.
He puts together really good teams year in and year out at a really difficult school to put good teams together. So that's kind of where I have him.
I posed this question earlier this week on Twitter, and a guy responded with, I said, you in the next 5 years, you have one coach to invest and build your program for 5 years. Who are you taking? He took Kyle Whittingham and Dave Aranda. which were two picks that you wouldn't necessarily think of. A lot of picks would go Kirby Smart, Dabo Sweeney, but Nick Saban a little bit out of the picture because you're not sure how long he's going to coach for. But Kyle Whittingham and Dave Aranda was a woke answer. I mean, those were two really impressive coaching candidates that aren't necessarily going to come to mind. And you have Dave Aranda coming in at 7, who, I mean, what he did with not that great of talent.
Beat the brakes off the Big 12,
and the defense was just
impressive.
Smothering. I mean, and he schemed that up. It's not like Dan Lanning at Georgia, as good of a job that he did at Georgia, anybody could have done that job. I mean, when you have every single position as a draft prospect, every single position was a former 5-star, it gets pretty easy to have a good defense. What Dave Aranda did at Baylor with 2 and 3-star recruits, really not that talented of players, and putting them into NFL draft prospects, putting together one of the best defenses in the country, and certainly in the Big 12, was extremely impressive. And this dude,
I mean, what he was able to do, where he took that Baylor, and granted, Matt Rule had it going in the right direction for sure, but the fact that he was able to take them and make them pretty convincingly better than Oklahoma, probably, I would say they were better than Oklahoma State personally. I think they were, when you saw those games, it looked like the better team, and that's just, I mean, he's a guy who, give him a couple more years. I don't think we'll see him at Baylor for much, much longer. I think
he's getting kicked around and going back to
LSU or Tennessee or whoever's the next head to roll in the SEC.
That's
I think
crazy. You
he's
just
very likely
two of the better coaches in the SEC. And
well, that's just the teams that have been shaking up.
That's true.
Or 10 years. So
the biggest,
who knows?
Anyway. The biggest thing that Dave Aranda does is he does things the right way. Like what he did with Jerry Bohannon, which extremely impressive, but not a lot of coaches do that, is he let him know coming into fall camp, hey, you're probably not the starter. I would go transfer. I mean, he could have very easily said it's a 50-50 race to keep him in the locker room, kind of force him to play for you next year.
The old Nick Saban to Jalen Hurts.
He did, and that's what all the coaches do, and you can't necessarily blame the coaches for it because that is how college football works, but he did it the right way, and I can't see why players aren't going to want to play with him. Talk about a good coach who's not a stand-up dude. We're going to get to Lincoln Riley coming in at number 6. Obviously, he also was given the keys to the car a little bit.
I don't think it was quite the Ferrari, and I agree. Yes. It was there was no Ohio State Ryan Day comp. I think Oklahoma was good, but they weren't perennially winning the Big 12 like clockwork. And so in fairness to Lincoln, he did take that program up a notch. I mean, he never got it to the promised land, and that's a school you can, I think, be a national title team. I think you have the resources, you have the pedigree and the recruiting that I think you should probably have been able to maybe take it to the next level and didn't, which is, I mean, and I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I just have I have him on the next row, probably behind the top 4. He's probably close to Brian Kelly.
Yeah, you got Brian Kelly coming in number 5. My take on Lincoln Riley is he's already, I know you're going to disagree, and you got a little hate in your heart if you disagree. He's already done a great job at USC. I mean, looking at his future recruiting classes, I get it. They haven't played a game yet. But in terms of the talent they're bringing in, they are unquestionably way better than they were last year. I mean, this team didn't even make a bowl game last year. USC
But then we'd make Kevin Sumlin the star of college football if it was about quick little infusions of talent, because when he got to Texas A&M, he did start recruiting,
and he was
really well
one of the better coaches for a while. He did a good job at Texas A&M for a bit.
Well, for the Johnny Manziel years, and then the wheels fell off pretty hard. So it's I don't think it's so early to say he's done a good job at USC. Even to hint at it.
What are they with 5-7, 4-8? This team did not make a bowl game. Were not competitive in a lot of games. Got blown out by the rivals UCLA and Notre Dame. But now they're favored to win the Pac-12. I mean, this team inarguably is super talented. And I quite frankly think they're going to win the Pac-12. The offense and the firepower they're getting on that side of the ball is going to be nuts. And obviously they have some questions on the depth and in the trenches. But it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to stop that offense, especially in the.
I don't know how that applies to Lincoln Riley being a coach yet, because you haven't how is he? You think he's higher? You think he's too low for me, or what?
No? I think this is accurate. I guess I shouldn't be fighting you on this. I think Lincoln Riley. There's a conversation he could be over BK, but yeah, he's probably not cracking the top 4.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But recruiting is such a big part of college football, especially in the NIL era, and he's clearly doing that at a high level. Let's get into Brian Kelly, I think has got a lot of wood to chop at that LSU program, and it was pretty broken when he picked it up. It's a talented team, and LSU is one of the easier coaching jobs to have. I mean, you pretty much have first dibs on all the kids from Louisiana, which is one of the best recruiting states in the country.
And you have no competition in the state.
And quite frankly, wherever BK's been, going back to Cincinnati, he was a winner. And then was a scumbag and left in a horrible way. And then went to Notre Dame, and he won. He made the college football playoffs a couple of times, almost got in this year as well. And now he's going to LSU. I mean, everywhere he's been, he's won. But he's never really cracked it. The guys that we're going to talk about next have all cracked it and are kind of considered the top 4 coaches.
And I know people say Notre Dame's a hard place to win. It's not. I think it's comparable to Michigan. I think both schools have a very similar placement in the pecking order of easiest place to win. So it's no Wisconsin. It's no. I wouldn't say it's Nebraska. Well, Nebraska maybe that's changing, but I don't think it's comparable with those two teams in terms of difficulty. But he did take over a dying program and brought it back and made it perennially really good.
Yeah. And now we're going to get into the top 4, and these guys have all have attained success at the highest level. And we're going to start with Jimbo Fisher, who back at Florida State he did a great job. I think people like to forget about how good that Florida State team was under him. And now he comes to Texas A&M. A little bit of a rocky start. I think he's been a little underperforming a couple 9-4 seasons, which is not really what Texas A&M fans expect. Now, destroyed the NIL first year of recruiting in the NIL. And I think the next 3-4 years with this recruiting class that he brought in is going to say a lot of the legacy.
Well, they're going to need to win some games for sure. And if
he needs to win a national championship, I think, in the next 4 years. With the talent that he has, I mean, it was the best.
At least in SEC.
At least, yeah, I agree. And so I think this is a fair spot for Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah, I mean, Jimbo Fisher, that's the problem, is he trailed off hard at Florida State. By the end of his tenure, that program was trending hard in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And he's not really gotten A&M going, I wouldn't say. What you said, he's made it better than it was when he took it over. But he hasn't really made it even in the ballpark of Alabama or Georgia. So I don't think that's okay, you're going to – Kirby Smart, I think they're close maybe. But I think Kirby Smart, what he's been able to do is make Georgia into an absolute powerhouse. And he took over a horrible situation too. So I think he brought that program back and has made them – I mean, they're right up there with anyone.
I mean, they had one of the better teams we've seen in college football in the last 5-10 years, especially on the defense side of the ball. This is my hot take. I think Kirby Smart will leapfrog Dabo Sweeney in the next couple of years. I mean, if you're a Georgia fan, you are so confident with the leadership that Kirby Smart brings. And yeah, to be able to dethrone teams like LSU and Alabama, especially Alabama, who was a couple notches up on you when you took over that Georgia team. People forget they were a play away from winning another national championship in 2017?
No, they've been good. You can't – I don't think it's fair to be, he hasn't gotten them quite to the – I mean, they're as good as Alabama, I would say.
He very easily could have had 2 national championships by now. I mean, that's how close he was to beating Alabama a couple of years ago before this year. I mean, I phrased that question on Twitter. Which coach would you want? I mean, this dude's only 45 years old.
I think he's the guy. He has to be the guy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think he's going to absolutely go on a tear at Georgia. I think Georgia's going to be kind of the Alabama the next 10 years. I mean, as long as Nick Saban's there at Alabama, Alabama's going to be there, and they're probably the favorite to win the national championship this year. But what Kirby Smart's doing in Athens, Georgia right now is just absolutely silly. He's doing a very impressive job. And then you got Dabo Sweeney at number 2, which – hard to argue with the success Clemson's had.
I think top 2 is not particularly close right now. In terms of accomplishments and and what they both also took over really difficult down teams and brought them. And I'm talking Nick and Dabo. They brought them back, and I'd say Clemson is a kind of a hard spot to be really good at. doesn't have the same booster backing that these other SEC schools have, or some of the big ACC powers. So that's kind of, I don't think it's that close with Kirby yet. I think it'll be close in a couple of years, but I still think these two are comfortably the alpha dogs of college football.
Now, here's my basically, I agree with you that he should be number 2 over Kirby Smart, but my question to you would be, how is he going to look? This is really the first year that he's had to replace his coordinators, as Brent Venables has been by his side for years now.
Yeah.
And he replaces OC and Tony Elliott. And now he's also trying to adapt to the transfer portal, which he just
That's the real problem, is he's very rigid, it seems like, in his approach to dealing with this.
He's going to have to lose that, because like you go into last year looking at that offensive line, you knew it was a problem in spring, you knew it was a problem in fall camp, and he just refused to do anything with it. And that defense was so good. I feel like if you protect DJ a little, although DJ wasn't great, you give him a little bit more protection, that they're probably winning the ACC again. But that offensive line was just absolutely brutal, and he refused to adjust in the transfer portal. He's going to have to adapt to that, and the NIL.
He's going to have to. I mean, Dabo is in an interesting spot moving forward. I think the fact that Clemson doesn't raise money like these big teams, they don't have the same – I don't think they have the same fan base, at least at the scale and the veracity that some – I think he's in a tough spot, I'd say. Moving forward, I don't want to doubt him, because I would have thought he's always in a tough spot, but he's a charismatic guy. It seems like his players would die for him. So
that is one thing which he's just done at such a high level is the players, they just love him. And I hate him. I hate Dabo Sweeney. I think he's the most annoying coach in the country, but his players love him, and that's all that matters. You know what I mean? I can sit behind my keyboard and crap on Dabo Sweeney all I want. It doesn't matter. It matters what the guys in the locker room think, and the guys in the locker room love him. They'll go to war with him every Saturday. And then, I mean, final rankings, this shouldn't become any surprise from anyone. Nick Saban, just the greatest coach that we've seen in the probably history of the sport. The question I want to ask is, how much longer do you think he's got in him?
I mean, even if he only had like 3 years, these other coaches are so far behind.
He could retire right now and nobody will catch him in this list.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby Smart would have to put together an absolute career to catch him. And I think Kirby Smart's the best chance, just looking at this.
I agree.
If Dave Aranda moves to LSU, I think you might find him in the mix for that too. But yeah, I mean, no one's close. It's just not even close. I mean,
the thing is, like,
he's our god, as Jimbo Fisher put it, even though that was not a nice thing he was saying. He is.
The thing with Nick Saban, and the craziest part is he's 70, I think low 70s. And he's currently coming into the season with one of the best teams we've seen. No, but it's one of the best Alabama teams that we've seen in the history of his program. And it's probably going to win.
You might have the defense that, I mean, Alabama hasn't had great defenses like they did 10 years ago, maybe, as of late. But this is going to, he's got the Heisman at quarterback. He's got a potential Heisman at the end.
It's not.
Yeah, we'll see. He's got a potential Heisman at running back. You could maybe argue with Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, you know how I feel about him.
It feels like they should be consensus favorites to win the national title.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when Nick Saban's got good teams, he wins. That's one thing. He doesn't drop bad years.
It almost seems like all last year, even when Georgia beat them in the SEC championship game, he was in such a good mood, because he's like, you're really going to let me potentially win a national championship with one of the team last year wasn't that great, and Georgia's team was loaded, and he still played in the national title, still came down to the fourth quarter. He almost won another title. I mean, this year he knows it's this team should, and you said it best, they never underperform. When they have a national title contending team, they almost always go out and win a national title. They almost always go make it happen. Hey, that's a wrap on our college football power rankings. I'm going to do my own top 10 power rankings. The top 5 probably staying the same, but I do have some coach. I want to give shout outs to At That Back Half. Again, thank you guys for supporting the channel. If you do like the content, you do like talking college football, subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments what you guys think of the list. Give us some coaches that Bill's sleeping on. We appreciate you guys watching. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.